very analogous to our conversation about demand shifters. Well, there's things other than market price that influence the quantity supplied by producers, and this screencast is going to walk us through how economists analyze those kinds of changes. I've got a little cartoon depicting technology change, but I'm going to stay with our cucumber example. And actually, agriculture has been a sector where technology change has been really important in the United States and elsewhere. Hybrid seeds, they're resistant to pesticides or herbicides or drought or whatever. There's seeds that develop. There's all sorts of growing techniques that are changing. It's actually a fairly dynamic sector, even if city folk don't really think about it that way. All right, let's get started with a graph, because that's so important and so delightful. All right, so I've drawn a single supply curve, and we're going to keep our focus on the Pakistani cucumber market. And what I've got shown right now is this reminder that we have this upward sloping supply. If price is initially low and quantity supply is fairly low, but price rises from P0 to P1, we see that quantity will increase from Q0 to Q1. So that change and the resulting movement in quantity supplied is called a change in quantity supplied. That's a movement along the supply curve. Remember, that's quite analogous to our just dictionary breath, our use of the term change in quantity demanded to distinguish that from a change in demand, a move of the entire function. We're going to see the same thing, same terminology used for supply changes. All right, so I'm going to use the same sort of mathematical notation to summarize the other kinds of things that can affect supply. So we introduced that last screencast. But here we're going to have the quantity supplied is equal to some function. I used f before, so I got to use small g. That's some different function than the demand function. Between that function is going to depend on market price. And indeed, for the short run, we're pretty confident that for almost every good we can think of, the supply curve is upward sloping. Anyway, we're going to, as we talk about any single supply curve like this single supply curve here, we're going to be holding constant. That's what this big, tall, vertical line means, holding constant a bunch of stuff. And if any of those things that we're holding constant changes, well, we're going to get a change in the whole supply function. Now, if something that's irrelevant for producers changes, well, there's no change. But if there's some underlying factor that's important for producers and it changes, we're going to see a change in the whole supply function, a change in supply. So as I indicated, technology is one of the big drivers. And if more advanced technology we have this measure of technology that gets higher as technology gets better, then what we're going to see is an increase in supply as technology gets better. So that's in cucumbers, it would be, let's say they made a cucumber that needed half the water that the old cucumber did. Well, now, you can grow cucumbers pretty abundantly all over the place instead of just by the riverbed and so on. Another big driver of supply is input prices. Everything from seeds to labor costs to fertilizer costs. If you run a tractor, energy costs are going to be important. Anyway, as those input prices go up, the quantity supply is going to go down. It's going to be harder to supply cucumbers to market if the seeds are really expensive. So I have a little minus sign there. Somewhat counterintuitively, we think about substitutes of consumption because we're consumers, right? It's easy to think that way. But there's also substitutes of production. So what would be the substitute of production for a cucumber grower? Well, maybe that same land that could grow cucumbers could grow radishes, or actually that's my substitute in consumption. That's just coincidence that it might also be a substitute in production. Let's say beans and melons and cucumbers. use similar type of soil and water so that I could plant cucumbers, or I could plant watermelons, or I could plant beans. Okay, so the price of beans goes up. Well, guess what? I'm going to be more likely to grow beans and less likely to grow cucumbers. So there's going to be a negative relationship. I can't think of one for cucumbers, but for a lot of products, there can be complements of supply. And again, I can't really think of one. Let's say cucumber leaves were used for something, then it'd be a complement. You produce some cucumbers, you're going to have the leaves of the plant. But anyway, I don't know what those might be good for. I'm going to use a complement of supply example outside of the cucumber market. And apologies if you're vegetarian, but if you as a rancher produce a side of beef and sell a side of beef, the beef that people eat, and you bring it to market, you inevitably supply the cowhide that steer used to run around in. So the beef, the meat, and the cowhide, the leather that the steer had as its skin, those go to market together. You can't produce one without producing the other. So those are complements of production. Manure, animal manure, horse manure, cow manure, those are actually marketable products in a lot of places. So if you run a riding stable and you offer riding lessons and horse boarding and all that, well, guess what? A complement of production. You can't do that without producing a lot of horse manure. So you can sell that stuff. Anyway, complements of production. If suddenly the price of beef goes up, well, guess what? You're going to have a big increase in quantity supplied of cowhide, or steer hide to be precise. All right, what else? Well, in cucumbers and a lot of things, weather can matter. Weather is the particular amount of rainfall, heat, etc. And let's say we had an index where the measure went up with better weather for growing cucumbers and went down with worse. Then we'd have this positive relationship between weather and the quantity supplied of cucumbers. Climate is just, over the long run, the change in weather patterns year to year. It's a long run average. If a climate gets better for growing cucumbers, we have more. It gets worse for growing cucumbers, we have less. Weather and climate are different. Weather is just one particular week or month or year's outcome of what the weather happens to be. Climate is sort of overall trends over the long term. Pests. Let's say if pests there's a lot of cucumber eating pests, then we have a high measure of pests. And if we got a year where the ladybugs killed all the cucumber eating pests, then we have a low pest measure. That's gonna, the more pests there are, the harder it is to bring cucumbers to market. And then weeds, sort of the same thing. And then, we could go on and on. Anything else that affects the quantity supplied to market by cucumber producers would be in this list of things that we hold constant to talk about any given supply function. But if any of these things changes and they're relevant for the quantity supply, well, we're going to get a change in the whole supply function. And for the supply, like I said, it's really important that you think an increase is a shift to the right, a decrease is a shift to the left. If you're thinking up, down, you're going to get it wrong. And so don't do that. All right, let's do a couple of examples. Let's say there's a new cucumber hybrid. Let's change our pen color to green. So there's this new cucumber hybrid. It's resistant to drought. Well, that means at any given price, it's going to be easier for producers to bring cucumbers to market. At any given price, there's going to be more cucumbers. Well, guess what? The whole curve is going to shift to the right. Again, I've got my arrow, increase in supply, shift to the right, and I'll even write the event down. New cuc hybrid seed. So now anybody looking at this graph knows, oh, okay, there was a new cucumber hybrid seed. It shifted that whole curve to the right. Here's my old one, labeled S. Here's my new one, labeled S prime. That's really important to get this habit of labeling down. All right, well, let's think about a negative event. Let's think about an increase in fertilizer prices that, everybody's bidding up that goat poop price because it's really useful for growing a lot of things. And also if you rub it all over your body, you become more beautiful. Whatever. I don't, what these spas do, who knows. But so fertilizer becomes more expensive. That's this input price going up. Notice I have a negative relationship. So if input prices are going up, it's going to be harder to supply cucumbers to market. That means at any given price, whether it's P1 or P0 or any other price, there's going to be a smaller quantity supplied to market. If we connect the dots on all the prices and the new quantities supplied, we get S double prime. Notice I've already used up S prime, so it's got to be double prime. If you're the cool kid that's got multiple colored pens in your pocket protector, this class is for you. It's really helpful to have different colors for different events because these graphs can get really complicated if you're trying to do everything just through labeling. I mean, you can do everything just through labeling, but it's pretty cool if you can have different colors for every event you're talking about. We've all noticed that the coolest people are the economists, right? I think we're the only group that dresses worse than the accountants. So the coolness is perhaps a bit overstated when I'm the one talking. All right, so this event was an increase in fertilizer prices. So that's how you do it. The shift of the whole curve, that's a change in supply. In particular, this one from S to S prime is an increase in supply. This shift from S to S double prime is a decrease in supply. Remember, increases go to the right, decreases to the left. Think right, left, not up, down.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.